Evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Churchill Planning Commission, February 12th. It's 7 o'clock. 6 o'clock, sorry, yeah. So let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there any public comment?
The agenda was posted on February 6th in accordance with NRS and Churchill County Code.
All right, item number 5, consideration of a possible reaction of approval or agenda as submitted or revised. Can I have a motion?
I move to approve.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Item number 6. Sorry. Consideration or verification and notification of all landowners in accordance with NRS and in the Churchill County Consolidated Code, Development Code.
All efforts to reach the neighboring landowners was made.
Thank you. On to number 7. Consideration and possible action of approval of the minutes of the meetings held on A, January 8th, 2025 public hearing, and B, January 30th, 2025 workshop. May I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pass. Number 8, old business. Consideration of possible reaction to continue and postponement of an application for the variance from the minimal lot size for a division of property filed by Mitzi Corkhill. The property is located at 400 East Corkhill Lane. Assessor's parcel number 006-831-35, consisting of 10.28 acres and in an A10 zoning district. The applicant proposes an approximate 1.7 acre parcel for a family member to build a residence near the family farm and a remaining approximate 8.6 parcel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Randy Hines, Public Works Director. Mitzi asked for an extension on this. She's been working with the Navy on trying to get the answers question that was brought up back in October. She's got some answers, but she doesn't have them all, so she's asking for a three-month extension to continue getting those answers so she can present it to you guys. So.
Is there any questions from anybody on the Planning Commission?
I move to approve the postponement for item A of old business for 3 months.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Item 9, new business. Item number A, consideration of a possible actions of a sending site application filed by CNA Reynolds LLC. This property is located off the Shores Highway. Assessor's parcel number 006-092-16, consisting of approximately 72.53 acres with approximately 59.47 irrigated water-righted acres in A10 zoning district. The applicant proposes to establish a sending site and place a conservation easement on the property. Randy?
Yeah.
Oh, and yes, I need to recuse myself due to financial reasons.
Again, Randy Hines for the record. This application is for approval of a sending site and transfer of development right calculations. The property is mostly water-righted, with the remainder being canals, drains, and farm roads. The remaining irrigated acreage is farmed with temporary water or farm map water. The property qualifies for the minimum standards by meeting the acreage requirement and dust control requirements. The property provides community benefit by agriculture preservation with water right retention on most of the parcel, protection of military operations, and protection of water recharge areas. The sending site reviewed this application on January 13th, 2025, and recommends approval of the sending site, as well as the recommended the total of the 88 TDRs.
Thank you, Randy. Is there any comments from the commissioners? All right, can I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Goings for the record. I move that we approve the sending site application filed by CA Reynolds LLC for parcel number 006-092-16.
Tammy Edgeman for the record. I second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Passes. Item B. Consideration
Mr.
of...
Chair, Dean Patterson for the record. Were the TDRs included in there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
In the motion.
Yeah, approval.
And then it should have been item B.
Mr. Chairman, so I'm going to move to amend my motion, which is to also include the 88 TDRs.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, passes. So we'll move on to item B, consideration of possible action. A, a sending site application filed by Arthur Pill. This property is located at 9350 Pasture Road. Assessor's parcel number 006-092-07, consisting of approximately 193.9 acres with approximately 155.32 acres of irrigated water-righted property. This applicant proposes to establish a sending site and place a conservation easement on the property.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Randy Hines for the record. Again, this applicant is for approval for the sending site and the transfer of development rights. This parcel is actually just south of the previous one. Property is mostly water-righted, with the remainder being canals, drains, county roads, farm work area, and home site, as you can see on the map above. The property qualifies for the minimum standards by meeting the acreage requirement and dust control requirement. This property provides community benefit by agriculture preservation with water right retention on most of the parcel, protection of military operations, and protection of water recharge area. Again, the sending site committee reviewed the application on January 13th of 2025 and recommends approval of the sending site and recommends the approval of the total of 252 TDRs.
Thank you, Randy. Is there anybody here to speak on that behalf? Oh, come on up, ma'am. And you can have a seat right here.
You mean like to go against it? Or just to be here to
No, to represent, sorry, yeah. And then push the little button there to turn it green.
Yep, now you're ready.
Thank you.
All right. Do you have anything to add to what Mr. Hines had to say?
I do not.
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Goings for the record. Mr. Chairman, can we get her name and address? Thank you.
Yes, can I get your name and address for the record?
Cheryl Gallio, address is 1525 Rancho Road, Fernley, Nevada, 89408.
Does anybody have any questions on the planning commission? All right, seeing none, can I get a motion?
Mr. Chair, Vic Ansotigi for the record. Based on the information provided in the application in the staff report in this meeting, I move to recommend the following to the Board of the County Commissioners. approval of the sending site application for Arthur Peel based on providing the community benefits of preserving 193.9 acres of farmland with surface water rights, protecting nearby military operations, and protection of water recharge areas. And item D, approval of 252 TDRs for the same property.
It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. So that passes. Move on to item C. Thank you very much.
To give it back
Go ahead
to
and
Red.
push it. All right. Consideration of possible action, a special use permit application for a home-based business filed by Leslie Beach. The property is located at 6755 Reno Highway. Assessor parcels number 008-141-18, consisting of .77 acres in the C2 zoning district. This applicant proposes to conduct a real estate office from her residence with an advertising sign and customer traffic. Is there anybody here to speak on that behalf? Can you come up? Can you state your name and address for the record, please? Yep.
Now can you hear me?
Yep.
Leslie Beach, 6755 Reno Highway.
All right. Dean, can you give us a little background on this?
Yes, thank you. Dean Patterson, Public Works and Planning for the record. So this property has a complex land use past. Some of the Planning Commissioner members may remember previous permitting on this property. The past residential uses on the property were non-conforming uses that went away long ago, and the site was operated as a commercial business for a long time. The applicant wanted to reestablish a residence, which is not normally allowed. She obtained a special use permit along with 2 setback variances for a duplex because multifamily dwellings were allowed at that time. Right afterward, code changes were made that also prohibited multifamily dwellings in the commercial zones. Thus, the residential duplex is now a legal non-conforming use. But if the residential units cease being used, it will lose its non-conforming status. The applicant wishes to have her realty business at the site, but does not want to convert the residential use to a full business scale, which would jeopardize the residential use. So a home-based business application was submitted. The request is for a home-based business, which is accessory to and subordinate to the primary residential use. This is particularly important for this location because if the business became the primary use, the residential use would lose its non-conforming status. Conditions of approval normally work to protect the neighborhood character from the business. In this case, though, they are more important for ensuring that the non-conforming status of the residential use is protected. The proposed home business needs the SUP for customers coming to the property and a business sign. Note that the sign is a technicality because there's already a full-scale commercial sign at the commercial site, which is allowed. Also note that no employees are proposed or authorized in this permit. The staff report reviews the 5 SUP criteria. There are no major issues aside from the non-conforming use issue. The only complexity identified is the handicap facilities that will be needed since customers will be coming into the home for extended periods for real estate activities and transactions. The building department did provide comments, which the most important of which related to the handicap facilities. Staff recommends approval. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
All right, Ms. Beach, do you have anything to add? Do you have anything to add?
No.
All right. I'll open it up to the Planning Commission if there's any questions.
Tammy Etchman for the record. Just a little bit of clarity. So there is a duplex currently on there, and you live in one portion, which would be the east or west?
East?
On the east side. And then the west side is going to be the office in the Other residential, so it's not really in your home? It's not a home-based business in your home, it's in the adjoining home, is that
Duplex.
correct?
Duplex. Yes, but we're using part of that duplex still for, they're very small buildings. So we're
Okay.
still using part of the duplex as
Okay.
our,
So just for the record, you live in the east, but you're going to run the business out of the second residence on the west?
correct.
And are you going to have employees there? Do you plan on adding agents?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, Mark Hyde for the record. Are you aware of the conditions that the staff is recommending? Have you
Yes.
seen those? And you agree to those conditions?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Goings for the record. So I kind of want to go back a little bit because I've sat on this board long enough now to when this came through. And can you kind of just bring everybody up to speed on how we kind of got here? Because I felt like when we did this, you were trying to move this whole thing back to residential so that you had a place to live. And I assumed at that time that we were probably running a business out of a different location. Okay, so now we are back to here, and we've got a special use permit on this. We have residential, but we're really trying to run a business out of that, another portion of the house. So, I mean, am I correct in saying that this is kind of the travels we've been here, and we've come from a commercial building back to a residential building, residential property, and we're kind of now trying to bring that into a commercial application. Even though it is a home-based, it's still a commercial application out of a residential. It's just a really non-conforming property is the problem, so. Okay, so I want to be clear on that, you know, I think most of these conditions are based on that they know that this is a home-based business. Okay, there's not going to be any room for more agents or anything else to come in there. Very good.
Mr. Chair, Joe Frey for the record. Ms. Beach, one of the recommendations in the staff report was limiting customers to appointment only and one customer at a time. Is the appointment only, is that a limiting factor for you or detrimental to your business?
Yes, it would be.
Okay, so it would be more favorable if you did not have the by appointment only
Right.
requirement? Okay.
Yeah, Mark Hyde for the record, just for clarification, if we disregard that condition, which really is there so that we limit this to one person at a time. So what's your plan, what would your plan be to mitigate the potential of more than one person coming at a time, where this would look more like a commercial, more like a business instead of a home-based business?
Well, basically, if someone's driving by and they come in and they don't have an appointment, I can't just tell them to leave. Because people do drive by. A lot of stuff is, most things nowadays in real estate are done online. They contact me online, we set up appointments. Because they have to now, you guys all probably know, you have to have a buyer's broker agreement before you can show a house. And then we're also with sellers, I'm not gonna bring sellers to the house, but actually go to their homes. So it wouldn't necessarily have to be by appointment only, but if someone drives in and stops in, they don't have an appointment, but they will be driving by and see a sign or whatever, but there's never very many people at the same time. I've never had that problem in 37 years, no matter where my office was.
Yeah, and I appreciate what Commissioner Frey has said. I think he's saying, let's make this so that your business, isn't controlled or stymied by that condition. But I'm trying to imagine in the future where you have neighbors, some neighbors, who look at this and say, I thought this was a home-based business, and I see people, 2 or 3 cars stacked up at a time. So all I'm asking is this. Let's say you have an appointment, someone's meeting with you, and somebody else just drives in. So how would you handle that? Would you say,
I'd make an appointment with the guy who just drove in, because I'm
Yeah.
not gonna dilute my time away from the person I'm already with.
yeah, and so you'd say, let's make an appointment, you can come
Yeah,
back later, and so that's the
absolutely.
way you'd handle that, and
Yeah,
then you wouldn't have more than one customer there that you're meeting. all the
Correct.
time. Okay, thank you.
yes, you're welcome.
So, you know, I'm going to argue that just a little bit more. In that, when Mr. Hyde first asked that question, you were okay with it, and then now we're not. But my feeling or my inkling here is that this is a home-based operation, and if you do have somebody come by, you're going to make that appointment so that you don't have two there.
Right.
I think with the A recommendation, that is what that's saying, that you have, or excuse me, whatever one that one is, it's C, excuse me. With item C, if you have a customer there that you already had an appointment with and somebody else drives in, you're gonna make an appointment anyway.
Right.
So I think that's probably, we just leave that in there, and I think that
That's fine.
solves all of the problem.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
That's my inkling anyway.
I agree, Jeff.
Is everybody good with that? I mean, I would concur with Jeff. I mean, as people stop by my office, I mean, maybe didn't have an appointment, but we make an appointment, or maybe that appointment just happened to be right then. I mean, so, I mean, we're not gonna have multiple people there, so, and if everybody's good with that. Do we have any more?
I'm also good with that. I just wanted to make sure that that concern was addressed, and I guess after discussion, it doesn't seem like it would make much difference either way. With that in mind, if you're ready to entertain a motion.
So I'm ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, Mark Hyde for the record. Yeah, based on information provided in the application, in the staff report, and heard tonight, I move that the findings have been met for conformance with the criteria found in the Churchill County Code 16.08.080H, and therefore approve the application for a home-based special use permit for a realty business at 6755 Reno Highway, APN number 008-141-18. This approval is subject to conditions as listed in the staff report.
Second?
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Real quick, is there any public comment on this?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I was thinking we probably ought to have a public comment.
You can come up to the podium.
You should always have the public comment first.
Got it, okay. Terry Pearson, and I live across the highway, across the field, around the corner, wherever, 500 Lucas Road. So by approving your request, I'm hopeful that this will bring in some more revenue to the county, to our county, but I'm fully supportive of any home-based business. I just want to get that on the record. At this location, it's been a dog groomer's, an antique store, and over a year ago, it was meant to be a residence for an elderly relative. So you want all over that, and I'm glad you did that. But my biggest problem is the lighting at this location, and so I'm sure that Mr. Hines has looked at that. My question is this going to be a 24/7 operation, because that sign is on from dusk to dawn. It's lit up like a big Christmas tree. There's no other businesses in the whole neighborhood that have lighting like that, and I just don't want it to be lit up like that all the time, because I can see it from my property. I'm sure the other neighbors can see it from their property. I'm sure the next door neighbor can see it from their property, because they're right next door. So that's my biggest concern, is the lighting there, and that's it. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dean, can you address that?
I guess I would have to ask questions of Ms. Beach. How is the lighting work on, is it like a light that shines at the face of the sign, or?
There's lighting on the sign, and it's just on the sign, but we have lighting on our fence line just to make it so it's lit up, because we don't want there's a big ingress egress there, that NDOT decided to put in. And so a lot of people pull in. If you'll notice between the little pump house and all the way to the first telephone pole, that whole ingress, egress, we have people pulling in there day and night, big trucks, everything. We put lighting on the fence to avoid them coming into our property because that's a lot of traffic, you guys know that. But that's why we have lighting on the top of the fence. The light on the sign is only on the sign, but I understand what she's saying because the lighting on the fence is a lot.
Okay. Just for clarification for everybody, lighting for a property is supposed to face down. If it's shining outward like at other properties or the road, then it shouldn't do that. It needs to be pointed down. So, but I don't know anything I don't know any of the details about these lighting, so I wouldn't be able to say.
Yeah, they are facing down on the fence.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks, Dean. So we've had a motion and it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that passes unanimously, Ms. Beach. There's a 10-day appeal period on all applications approved by the Planning Commission. So after that time, the department will be in contact with the applicant to complete the process. Thank you. So item D, consideration of possible action, a special use permit application for a home-based business filed by Jennifer Clark. The property is located at 6150 Cox Road, assessor's parcel number 008-113-54, consisting of 12 and a half acres in the A10 zoning district. The applicant proposes to operate a dog training and boarding facility for 10 dogs or less. Is there anybody here to speak on that behalf? Thank you. Can you please state your name and address for the record?
My name is Jennifer Clark, and do you want my current living address, or do you want the property we're talking about?
Yeah, your current living address.
My current living address is 2580 Rice Road, Ballin.
All right, thank you. And then Dean, can you give us some more insight?
Sure. Aiden, will you be speaking too?
I can.
Okay. If you do, then you would just do the same thing as your mom did. So Dean Patterson, Public Works and Planning for the record. We have a proposed home-based business for dog training and boarding kennel. That's tentatively named Mannered Mutts. And the applicant is proposing this on behalf of her son, Aiden. Just FYI, Aiden pointed out a couple errors in the staff report. His name is spelled with an A-N, and he also pointed out that the staff report notes that the dog access doors will be, are incorrectly listed as being closed 9 p.m. to 7 p.m., which would be wrong. It's 9 to 7 a.m. So just FYI. Aiden has dog training experience. Both parties will eventually live on the property, but the buildings are currently being renovated. This raises an important point because the home-based business cannot operate unless the business owner lives in the home. This is one of the recommended conditions of approval. The request is for a home-based business, which is accessory to and subordinate to the primary residential use. And this home-based business needs the SUP for customers coming to the property and the business sign. Dog kennels have a high risk of being a nuisance to a neighborhood and require carefully crafted precautions. Conditions of approval are needed to protect the neighborhood character from the business. The application provides an excellent description of the operations and precautions. While the kennel is the primary facility, intensive dog training services are also offered. That is Aiden's part. There are a number of important factors to note and conditions of approval relating to them. One of these is that businesses with outside operations are normally prohibited, but the code makes exceptions that include dog kennels. A boarding business often allows boarders to have a trainer visit to train the dog or the owner. In this case, Aiden will be doing that. This use does not allow for classes allow classes for groups nor for people that do not board their animal at the site, so that outside people cannot come for classes. There are a number of important protections described in the application that address concerns with kennels, and some also have conditions of approval related to them. These include a limited number of dogs, outside doors in each pen that are closed at night, building insulation to reduce barking noise, a waste management plan, and customer visits limited to one at a time. The staff report reviews the 5 SUP criteria. The issues noted above were raised in criterion 1 related to neighborhood compatibility, and criterion 5 related to environmental impacts. Conditions of approval for these issues are included in the staff report. We did receive comments from the building department, so issues related to building construction need to be followed. The fire marshal also noted that the state fire code has laws relating to kennels that may apply, so you'll need to check with the state fire marshal's office. You may be small enough that they're not triggered, so please check with them. With that, staff recommends approval, and if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Dean. Is there anything you would like to add, Ms. Clark?
Nope, not unless there's questions.
All right. Do we have any questions from the board?
Tammy Etchman for the record. I just want to make sure that you're aware of the conditions on here. 2A is, I'm sorry, it isn't 2A, I just lost my place here. That, item number 1, that the permit will be subject to an annual review. Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Is there any public comment? Can you come up, ma'am, and state your name and address for the record?
Susan Higbee, 6297 Cox Road. I am opposing this. I have lived out there nearly 9 years, and it's quiet, and I'm concerned about dogs barking all night, all day long, and I don't think it's fair to the neighborhood. So I'm opposed to it.
All right, thank you very much. And I've seen somebody else, is there, come on up, please. Can you state your name and address for the record?
Jose Molina, 6060 Cox Road. I just have a couple concerns just for the prior owner. The fence is very poor built. It's like a plastic mesh fence that neighbors R2 properties. I actually had to build a big berm along that fence just because of how poorly it was built. The dogs kept getting underneath, and I kept having issues with my previous neighbor. That and the noise, as well as she stated, I'd like to see how they're gonna control the noise, just because I am basically just east to that property. I'm a neighboring property. I also have chickens. I have 3 kids. So if these dogs are aggressive, what kind of training are they gonna be doing? If these dogs get out, do they have certain protection? Because once again, we have a very weak barrier along that fence line as it is right now. So there's a lot of concerns that I have as well with the whole operation. I'm not opposing it, there needs to be more clarification and a lot of security, because as of right now, there's really not much security between us as far as the fence goes. The fence is a plastic mesh, and it's literally 8-foot stakes that were put into the ground, and they're put together with zip ties, plastic zip ties. And I've had that fence come apart 15 times. And the neighbor that bought the place tore the fence down without my permission. My father put up the fence, he tore it down, put up his fence, and we've had issues for a long time. So the fence is a huge concern for my chickens, for my kids, and also the noise and how they're gonna manner the dogs, because 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. seems a little excessive. My kids go to bed at 8 o'clock. That's their bedtime. They go to bed at 8 o'clock. So for dogs to be barking at 9 o'clock, that's a little excessive to me, you know?
Yep.
But
All
I
right,
appreciate
thank
it.
you very much. Is there any other public comment? All right. Ms. Clark, do you have any idea how that you guys would redo the fence, or did you have any plan of addressing the fence between you and your neighbors?
We do know that that fence is probably not stability-wise what we would want it to be for maintaining and keeping the dogs safe themselves from escaping and running away and stuff. So we are already proposing and considering to upgrade and make changes to that fence. Biggest thing is most likely the dog training is happening inside the facility. So outside time is going to be leash, bathroom breaks for the dogs, not so much free range roaming. You're the trainer. Do you want to speak on how you plan to train and handle some of that?
Sure.
Give them
Can
your
you please
name
state your name and
address.
address for the record?
I'm Aiden Clark. I live at 2580 Rice Road. And for training, it's basic obedience, which takes in barking, which is a big concern of a lot of families. And that's going to be one of the main things I work on, training dogs to prevent them from barking. And that's why I plan to limit it to so few dogs, because a lot of dogs is hard to handle, but a few is much easier.
So I did have a question then. So the dogs would be in the, can you go back a slide?
Back a slide.
Are going to be there in that, in kind of that blue building or whatever that building is, right?
Yes.
They're going to be mainly inside. They're not going to be outside of the property.
Yes.
Or, I mean, outside of the building. Or will you have dog runs outside of the building?
So if you go back to that picture that kind of has the interior with exterior a little bit, so that picture that was up there before he asked you to move it. Go back one, right there. So that little, those 5 grassy patches on each side, that's the outside. Right now, that's covered with a roof, but it's outside of the building. The plan is to individually fence in those, so that's where the dogs will be. They'll have an outdoor space and the indoor space. Like we said in the notes, and Mr. Dean said, basically, at a certain point in time, night, 9, 8 p.m., the outside access for the dogs will be shut off. My guess with your training, if the dogs are being noisy, they're not going to be allowed to be outside because we don't want to be a problem for the neighbors. So their closure can be shut off at any point in time that he sees fit if they're not obeying and doing noise. And then that's, again, what he's training them for, is to not be a nuisance in personal people's homes and on the training facility.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Goings for the record. So I want to reconfirm, each of those individual 10 locations there will have their own fencing each cubicle off from each cubicle, correct?
Right.
And fencing that cubicle, I'm going to call it a cubicle at this point,
Yeah.
off of the main property. So the intent here is those dogs will not be roaming the property. They will be fully contained internal of that building with a run on the outside, and that is it. So the leash portion of it is only when you're internal of the building? Because we were talking about they would be on leash or something, so.
Well, if you take him out for a walk to give him exercise,
I see.
they'll be on leash while he's walking them around.
So they would
outside
be
the
on leash outside of its own cubicle and that building, one at a time.
Yes.
So then, to address some of the comments that were made here, I think your noise is going to be, as long as you're bringing those dogs in at 8 o'clock, I think you're probably going to eliminate your noise. I am going to go back to the fence issue. If you're out potentially walking that dog, exercising that dog on the property, I think you do need to have some protection because these dogs are not familiar with the neighborhood or anything else. If one does get loose, I mean, we have a person that is concerned about his children, right? So I think that fence needs to be addressed as well. I don't know what everybody else thinks, but I think that perimeter fence needs to be addressed, and possibly in the recommendations.
Joe Frey, for the record, I'm not too terribly concerned about the fence as long as the dogs are on a leash. I think it's no different than a dog walking down the road with somebody. You know, I would encourage people to obviously be good neighbors, work with your neighbors, use common sense. If your neighbor has kids that go to bed at 8 o'clock, put them to bed at 8 o'clock. Summertime, maybe things are fine till later, but if part of the obedience training too is to keep barking to a minimum, then hopefully that's not an issue. So I don't see the fence as being too much of an issue with the neighbors as far as dogs are concerned, you know, as long as they're on a leash and most of it's happening in this facility that's already got very adequate fencing.
Tammy Edgman for the record. So just to clarify, if the fence is not going to be constructed and built around the property, then there will never be dogs ever outside roaming or running. And so that'll take us back to item number 1, why we have it to be viewed in a year, so that if there are concerns from neighbors, things are not being done according to the recommendations, then it could be addressed at that time. Correct?
That's correct. Back to Commissioner Frey here. I get where he's coming from here, but we are running a business here. So if you're running a business, we can put a few more restraints on you that, you know, you may not have to have at home because it is not a home-based business, correct? So that's why my recommendation would be, as he said, be a good neighbor. Let's make sure our fence is between in case something does, excuse me, I get a little, my hands get flying. In case something does happen, you have a secondary protection between them because he doesn't know your dogs and those dogs are not going to know that family either. They may be just as friendly as can be, but you just never know. So maybe it doesn't need to be added to the recommendations, but I think it would be something that, you know, on a review, that's something we're going to probably want to see.
Yeah.
Dean
Mr.
Patterson,
Chairman.
for the record, I just wanted to point out there's a couple things being discussed. The fence, if that is a desire, it needs to be an additional condition of approval. And then folks were talking about the timing. If you wish to have a specific timing where the dogs are put away, then that needs to be a specific condition of approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mark Hyde for the record. You know, we want to be supportive of this new business that you're trying to get off the ground. So I have a couple of questions. How far away is the nearest home, your nearest neighbor?
So in this image, the dog kennel and the employee home, which is where Aiden will be living once the business is fully up and running, is pretty far back, about halfway on the whole property line. The nearest actual home
Yeah, neighbor's what I'm after.
is the one that you can see, which I do believe is the gentleman that spoke. That's right there.
Okay.
And I believe somebody said in the report that it's like 500 feet away.
So it's quite a distance. Just want to establish that. But the second thing is this criteria 5 specifies what you're going to do to mitigate noise. And I like your plan. Each one of these individual kennels is insulated to mitigate noise. And then the entire kennel, of course, is fenced in, so they're not able to get out of it. They're inside their cubicle, as has been referred to before, but then they have a little run outside. And what you're saying is you'll have them on a leash when you go outside of that area, right? Yes. This is really all about management. Until you can make enough money where you can, the total amount of fence that you'd have to build that would prevent a dog from going through that fence, that kind of fence is going to cost a lot of money. And I don't see you this first year being able to do that. So we have a special use permit. It has an annual review. We come here a year later and we have complaints from the neighbors that we have a dog that's run out 6 or 7 times or even 1 time. Then at that time, I can see that we would say, well, to keep going with this business, you're going to have to put up a fence. And a fence may be required over time. We may, as a body of planning commissioners, say, you know, in a period of time, we've given you opportunity to kind of build this business up. We think you should build a certain amount of that fence in the 2nd year, 3rd year, whatever. But I'm feeling like it's quite a burden to place on this little business to say, when you take that entire property and say, build a fence that would prevent a critter or dog to go through it. So I like criteria 5. I also like the idea that we have a manager who's going to make sure that doesn't happen. A trainer who's going to make sure a dog doesn't run free. Thank you.
Tammy Hitchman, for the record, there doesn't always have to be a perimeter all the way around the property either, so keep that in mind too for cost effectiveness. If you come into having problems and you need to make adjustments, you can always add an additional second set of security just around the building that you plan on doing the business on. So there's lots of options for you. Okay.
All right, any more discussion? Can I have a motion for the decision?
Mr. Chair, one more thing, Dean Patterson for the record. So there are a couple people who came to talk, and some of the planning commissioners were pointing out that there's a 1-year review. And so the point I just want to make is for the neighbors that this time next year, there's another opportunity to talk about the business.
So,
Well, that's assuming we're approving it. We haven't got there yet, but.
Mr. Chairman,
And then that being said, we do have a 1-year, and everybody, the neighbors will be notified if this is approved. So you can come back and let us know if there is a problem or not.
There's no notification of neighbors, but if there was a complaint filed with a code enforcement official.
So you would need, if
or
there is.
they could show up this time next year.
Yeah, so if there is a problem, you would need to file a complaint with Lorelei here with the code enforcement officer.
Okay, and
Jeff?
one other thing, sorry, Mr. Chairman, sorry for interrupting. So when I was reading through these, where the customer visits shall be limited to hours between 8 and 8, I guess I assumed at that point that would be like the limit that the dogs would be out. So if we need to add that as another recommendation, I think that 8 o'clock is probably a good time for the dogs to be brought back into the kennel. That way, again, you're being a neighbor. Do we need to add that recommendation? Okay, so I think in any of the motions that we make, guys, we need to put that time limit in there so that we're not affecting the neighbors at 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
I was just reviewing the staff report, and I realized, which is one of the things Aiden was correcting me on, is that the outside access doors for the individual pens that you were seeing up on the screen, that is closed at 7, is that right? Okay, so the dog should be put away by 7.
7.
So if you wanted that to be specific, then please go ahead and make that change.
I don't believe we need to make that change where that was in his action plan, and therefore that's why it wasn't a condition to approval.
I just want to make sure, because my understanding is that says 9 PM to 7 AM.
Yeah.
And which is not 7 PM. And so if you want it to be earlier than 9 PM, I believe you do need to have some type of.
I believe Dean mentioned that he got the numbers transposed, and it's supposed to be 7, right? It was supposed to be 9 AM to 7 PM.
I thought it
Yeah,
was just
correct.
the
9 PM to 7 AM was the typo, and was corrected
typo
at the
was only
beginning
on
of
the
this.
AM PM set, and so currently the plan says no training between 8 PM and 8 AM. Outside access doors are closed from 9 PM to 7 AM. So if you want it to be outside the 9 PM to 7 AM hours, I suggest you put it in a condition.
Okay.
So if you want 8 PM to 7 AM, you
Can
should
I
say-
make a statement? So I believe with our type up, so that exterior fence, that mesh, the plastic mesh that the gentleman was talking about, that is actually, I believe, what we were talking about, not necessarily the actual dog training doors for the dog's individual kennels. So I don't know what time you specifically are thinking, but his hours of operation would be for business is 8 to 8. I don't foresee that he's going to be working and training the dogs beyond 8 PM. So that is an easy adjustment and change to just state that we're going to have the dogs inside between 8 AM to 8 PM, or is there indoor-outdoor time? After 8 PM to 8 AM, they would be having that access closed, so they couldn't go in and out. But that was the gate we were actually talking about, is if he is done for the night and in, that would be the gate that would be closed, so that way there's no business coming in and out of the property after 9 PM to 7 AM.
Okay, so correct me,
I think
Joe.
that was a little bit of confusion.
Yeah,
on
I think
the
we
door
could
stuff,
add,
'cause
couldn't
there's
we,
so
on
many access
E,
points.
that 8 AM to 8 PM on visits and training? And conclude it with that?
Yeah, I believe if you just wanted to modify the standard conditions for 2E to say customer visits and outside training of the dogs will be limited to the hours of 8 AM to 8 PM.
Yeah.
And outside training is what we're going to add there.
All right. Can we have a motion for the decision now?
Tammy Hitchman for the record. Based on the information provided in the application and the staff report and heard tonight, I move that the findings have been met for the conformance with criteria found in CCC 16-08-080H, and therefore approve the application for a home-based business for a special use permit for a dog training and boarding kennel at 6150 Cox Road. APN is 008-11354. This approval is subject to all conditions as listed in the staff report, in addition to the corrections to 2E.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. And this passes unanimously. There is a 10-day appeal period on an application approved by the Planning Commission. After that time, the department will be in contact with the applicant and complete the process. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Item E, consideration of possible action regarding a special use permit application for a rail-based services facility filed by Tactical Cleaning Acquisition LLC. The property is located at 17127 Inland Port Drive, Assessor's Parcel Number 009-251-77, in the Industrial Zoning District. The applicant proposes to establish a liquid butane transloading facility. Is there anybody here to speak on that behalf? Can you guys come up? Please state your name and address for the record.
Just hit the red.
Crystal Connor, I work for Energy Transfer, and do you want my home address or corporate address? 1300 Main Street, Houston, Texas, 77002.
All right, thank you.
Chet Ackerman, I'm with Tactical Cleaning, and it's 1101 North Cedar Drive in Stroud, Oklahoma.
All right. Dean, would you like to kick this off?
Sure, Dean Patterson for the record. So the Western Nevada Rail Park is also known as the Fernley Business Park or the Port of Nevada. It was established long ago at the county line, has an extensive site history that is described in the staff report, so I won't go over it here. This is a fairly simple project. There are not even structures or rail track proposed, but it has an important characteristic that requires SUP review. Specifically, the handling of hazardous materials triggers the permit. Standard transloading of non-hazardous waste materials can be done freely along rail spur segments, but the proposal is to transload butane from rail car to long-haul trucks. Consequently, operational safety is the primary concern for this application. This operation is intended to enhance or supplement operations at the Reno facility run by Energy Transfer, which is Crystal's company. Note that Energy Transfer is also the parent to Crestwood Gas Company that currently operates at the site. They operate the three, I think it's propane, tank cylinders that are at the main rail operations. You can see them in the air photo there. Butane transloading activities. The application and staff report describe the transloading operation. The application includes the large, nearly 200-page NDEP application submittal, and it includes useful information such as safety plans and other safety information. The staff report points the reader to these items in the different pages. The fire marshal has reviewed the materials and has some safety concerns that are discussed under the criterion 5 of the staff report. Butane is a hazardous material and is described in the submittal's material safety data sheet. It is colorless and mostly odorless gas that is kept in a compressed and extremely cold liquid state using high-pressure tanks on rail cars and trucks. It is also heavier in air, so it will pool on the ground. It comes with significant fire, explosion, and human exposure hazards. Transporting and handling butane requires specific and careful safety measures. The location within the site is shown on the site plan. Can you go back one slide, please? Yeah. So just north of the office and central operations there at the rail park. The butane transloading will be conducted by 2 employees, which provide double coverage for safety and allowing overlap transloading operations. Transloading uses specialized trailer-mounted diesel-powered compressor equipment that is pulled by a standard truck. The trailer is not described in the submittal, but I personally have seen pictures of the vehicle. The trailer's parked next to the rail car, and then the tank truck is parked next to the trailer. The equipment is connected with high-pressure hoses to both the rail car and the truck, and this is a closed-loop system that prevents spills and leaks. The application indicates that no more than 7 rail cars will be transloading in the transloading position at a time. About 10 trucks are expected to be loaded today, which is about 3.5 rail cars. With a daily stream of butane rail cars, the remaining full cars could serve as a rotating storage. That would be a buffer in the event of a minor rail disruption. There may be additional butane cars that may be staged in other locations on the site. That would increase the buffer. There are 5 special use criteria reviewed in the staff report. The primary issue is safety hazard concerns discussed under criterion 5 of the report, which address environmental impacts, including public safety. The staff report discusses worst-case scenarios. These are highly unlikely, but most of the larger industrial sites in Churchill County have experienced a worst-case scenario. The county's position is that advanced planning and safety measures will further reduce the risks and ensure the facility and emergency responders are better prepared for a worst-case scenario. 3 specific scenarios are considered in the staff report based on information in the hazard assessment of the application, and that includes an explosion safety radius diagram, which is on the screen there. The yellow circle is contained within the Fernley Business Park property. The assessment calls this an alternative scenario radius. This danger area is associated with a major hose rupture, releasing butane for 10 minutes, followed by an explosion. A red circle labeled worst case impact is mostly contained within the Fernley Business Park property. This danger area is associated with a full rail car rupturing and releasing the contents of butane within 1 minute, which is very fast. followed by an explosion. The south edge of the circle encompasses off-site developed properties along Resource Drive. Can you point? Oh, maybe I can here. Hold on, oh, there it is. So it says Moss and Sons is right there at the end of Resource Drive. So there's a number of small businesses there. The north edge of the circle encompasses the geothermal well piping associated with the Patua geothermal plant. The third scenario in the staff report would be most similar to that red circle. This dangerous area is associated with a major type of tank failure called a BLEVE, boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion, and it can be associated with the other two scenarios. These are mostly caused by extended fire that eventually overcomes the tank safety features and then results in rupture and exploding, taking place within seconds, much like a bomb. Luckily, these usually come with an extended time for firefighting efforts to control the fire before the boiling explosion point. These are most often seen in propane tank scenarios in or adjacent to fires that are burning for a long time. Staff and the fire marshal have done research into these situations and have had extensive discussions about the different scenarios, their possible consequences, and possible safety measures to deal with them. These are discussed in detail in the staff report. A recommended condition of approval is the development of an emergency management plan in coordination with the fire marshal. The fire marshal is here tonight if you wish to ask questions. So that plan would include safety measures and stuff. Such safety measures would be determined in consultation with our fire marshal, the state fire marshal, the transloading operator, and the rail park facility owner, not in this permit. So I just want to be clear about that. That decision is not intended to, that discussion is not intended to require the use of any specific safety measures, but rather to inform the planning commission of the things that are being considered. There's an emphasis on reducing the chance of a follow-up or chain of BLEVEs caused by an initial incident that causes damage to other butane cars or outside gas storage tanks like the ones that are on site already. Some of the safety measures would be that would be considered include planning for and controlling sources of widespread fire such as petroleum spills, separation of the butane transloading location from the main operations center and those existing tanks that are on site, limiting the volume of butane car storage and limiting the duration of it so it's of a rotating stock nature, so it's not standing storage on the tracks, which is a concern for the fire marshal. Separation of butane cars during transloading, physical barriers to prevent or reduce damage to pressurized tanks, such as bollards or earthen berms, physical barriers to deflect blast impacts, and then notification of the mainline railroad company in the event of a leak being detected without an explosion. And these are all discussed in detail in the staff report. The staff report also discusses the damage consequences. In summary, the area of heavy damage and human toll would be mostly confined to the rail park facility. Some damage to the nearby geothermal piping should be expected. Some damage to businesses in the Resource Drive industrial area could be possible for larger incidents, though the high ground along the highway would deflect some of the blast impact. We received comments from the fire marshal who emphasized that he wants to kind of work these out in the emergency management plan. And so with that, staff recommends approval. And with this approval, that would initiate the consultation with the other parties to figure these important issues out. So with that, I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Dean. Real quick here, I see you mentioned it, that the fire marshal is in the building. And is there anything that you would like to add, Mitch? Or would you like to just address questions as they come up? All right. Is there anything that you guys would like to add to what Dean has stated, or?
I think I would just add that, as Dean stated, this is kind of the first step in the process. We do operate these type of facilities at 14 other locations across the country. So we are extremely familiar with the safety precautions that are needed. By far, Nevada is the most stringent, but we are working through it. And that's okay, because it forces us to be even safer. I do have a small presentation on the transloading equipment itself, if you guys are interested when we get closer to the end. That's okay. Otherwise, just as Dean stated, this is the first step in the process. Directly after this, we're going to meet with the CAP, or I think you guys call it something different, right? The NDEP or something?
Oh.
I think you guys call it the NDEP. To us, it's known as CAP. And that initiates kind of all of the emergency planning. So Chet here works for Tactical Cleaning. They'll be leasing the site from, is it IRG?
Yeah,
Western Nevada?
Yeah, Western Nevada.
And then our Energy Transfer's product will be flowing into, via rail car, will be flowing into the site. Just as in the recommended conditions, it will not be static storage. It's always moving. We'll have trucks coming in during their hours of operation, which I understand trucks are available to come from 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. After that, no truck activity. Before that, no truck activity. So they'll be carrying the product, just as he stated, it could be up to 3.5 cars a day. It could be less than that. It could be more than that. So the way our season works is it goes from September 16th through April the 30th. And we're able to do more volume at the very beginning and the very end of the season due to the nature of how the EPA regulates our process. So with working with CAP, we are required to do PSM, which is Process Safety Management Plan, also a Risk Mitigation Plan, a RMP, which houses Site Security Plan, Emergency Response Plan. What else am I missing?
On-site security.
Yep, on-site security. So those are the things that I'll just say, and then any questions you guys have.
All right. I'll go ahead and open it up to the board.
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Goings. So could you explain to this board the difference between propane, butane, pentane, and then I'm curious, what is this butane? What is its use? You're saying there's a season where it's used, and so yeah, can you expound on that?
Yes. So propane and butane are very similar. Propane is obviously stench. That's why if you see on the side of the truck it says odorized. Butane says non-odorized. It doesn't have, I think it's called ethyl mercaptan, I think is what it's called. Also, propane is at a much higher operating pressure. So the operating pressure of butane is generally between 0 and 30. Occasionally it gets up to 50. It should not get past 50. The operating pressure of propane, I think, is between 1 and 150, sometimes up to 200. Pentane is a whole different animal. The pressure is very, very low. Energy Transfer actually handles that product also in the Northeast. And I do not believe that it is the qualifications for hazmat are quite as strict on pentane. So your second part of your question is, what is this used for? So 2010, Energy Transfer purchased a patented process from Texon, another oil and gas company. Sunoco Logistics purchased it in 2010. In 2015, Sunoco Logistics and Energy Transfer became Energy Transfer. So the EPA says that your gasoline in your car tank can be a higher pressure in the wintertime than it can in the summer, obviously because of the heat, right? So that's why our season is from September 16th through April 30th. They deem those winter/early spring months. So we are able, the reason I said it's busier in the beginning and the end is because, so you have a pipeline that's shipping gas to a gasoline terminal. In this case, it's in Reno, right? So they're shipping what we call raw gas to a terminal in Reno. We're able to capture the opportunity in what they're shipping versus what the EPA says the pressure in your gas tank can be. So if for instance, they're shipping 8-pound gas and the EPA says your gas tank can be up to 11, we're able to capture those extra 3 pounds by putting butane, mixing it with butane. So it's a blending operation is what it's called.
So it's not a specific use other than it is a specific use, but it is used to adjust pressures on other tanks.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Do you have any other comments?
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Mark,
so now another one popped up. So
Yes.
we're adjusting pressures on other gas tanks. What typically is that gas that you're adjusting pressures? Is it butane as well? Or?
No,
Yeah.
it's the gasoline that goes into your gas tank.
Gasoline?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
Yes.
this is just to adjust pressures on gasoline storage tanks is
Yes, sir.
basically it. Okay.
Yes,
Very
and so
good.
what happens from there is the pipeline ships up raw gas. Let's say hypothetically, we capture 2 pounds of opportunity with butane, however much butane that is. Our patented system, as the gas is going into the truck, it's taking a real-time analysis of the gasoline and it's injecting butane at the same time. So that's why we're able to go up until the very last second on April 30th, and then we shut it off. So then the truck, a different gasoline truck you guys see driving around all the time, comes to pick up the gas from the gasoline terminal, in this case in Reno, and take it to the gas stations.
Mark, did you?
You know, what I'm interested in is how far along we are with some of these emergency plans. If I heard you right, you said that some of these requirements that you're being faced with are actually more strict than what you're accustomed to. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
I love hearing that.
I do too.
And you're willing to comply with that.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
So could you give us an idea of how many incidents we have? You've been at this some time, but how many incidences have we had where something's gone awry with the kinds of restrictions that you normally are accustomed to? How often does this happen?
So I've been in transloading for 10 years, and I've had one incident due to operator error. That's it. I've had no explosions, no fires, no sparks, nothing. I've done everything from, currently I manage the transportation and all of the transloading sites. And before that, I managed all of the fleet of transloaders that we own as Energy Transfer, and worked with all 14 transloading sites. At that time, I think it was 17. Worked with all them, worked with all the operators, did the training, and we've had one. And it was recently in North Carolina, an operator didn't close a valve and walked away.
Do we have any kind of redundancy plan for operator errors?
Yes.
Do we?
So I'll go into my presentation.
Okay.
So if you'll go back
That would be good to
yep,
see.
right there is perfect. Just you can go to the pictures, it's fine. So I'll start on the top left. So that's a picture of the entire transload unit. It does have stairs that go up to the top of the rail car. So one thing you should note about rail car, butane and propane rail cars, in this case butane, is a normal rail car you might see going down the track has a valve on the bottom. These cars do not have a valve on the bottom. Everything is coming from the top of the car. So move to the top right picture. That's just a close-up picture of the diesel engine. It's about a 50 horse. It's the equivalent of like a medium-sized tractor that you might find on a farm. Also in that picture is the like the power unit. It flips on. Actually, I don't know which one that is, so I don't know what that box is. But in the bottom left of that picture, Dean, or whoever's controlling it, there's like some
driving the mouse.
Okay,
cursor,
there's some
yeah.
levers. Those levers actually control the top right picture, bottom left corner of the picture. So there's like some levers. They control the stabilizers and they control the stairs. Bottom left picture is the 4 valves. In this case,
There you go. Go up a little bit more, Lorelei. Yeah.
yep, no, that's fine. In this case, the far right valve on the picture with the 4 valves in the bottom left, that valve is always left closed. It is what's considered a bypass valve, and we do not use it ever. The other 3, there are 2 liquid lines and 1 vapor line. Those yellow valves that you see are called Snappy Joes. So one thing you should note is that our system is pneumatically controlled. So on the unit there is a small air compressor. It's just regular air. It's not anything special. But we use that air compressor to pressure up all of the air lines on the unit, and it will keep the valves open. So you have to physically open them, but it will keep them open. If for any reason that loses pressure, everything closes, the engine shuts off, and the transloading is stopped. There is no way for it to get out. Like Dean stated, it's a completely closed system. There is no electronics on the system except for that diesel engine. the bottom right picture is a vapor compressor, so we do not have vapors escaping to atmosphere. It's essentially a negative pressure system, so it's taking the pressure off of the truck and pushing it into the rail car to push the liquid onto the truck. And so all of that vapor is contained either in the unit, the rail car, or the truck. So as far as redundancy, you can go to the next picture. So up top on the bottom picture there, there's an operator. I think there's a guy up there. Yeah, there's an operator up there. So on the rail car, there's what's called ESVs. It's about this long. The valve is about this long, and it's connected to a pipe about a foot long. That is pneumatically controlled, as well as a gallon flow per minute. So let's say hypothetically an operator leaves the valve all the way open and disconnects the hose for whatever crazy reason and walks away. The second that that valve senses that it's flowing over 200 gallons per minute, it snaps closed. Additionally, once he pushes it's called a mushroom valve, it's an ESD valve, everything closes. So the flow of product is completely stopped. And then you can see the top right picture, or top left picture is another picture of the rail car with the transloader. And then the top right picture is how it hooks up to the truck. So you can see that the 4-valve picture I showed you earlier would be on the right-hand side, and then the truck is also on the left-hand side. So I think there was somewhere I read in here, there was some concern about like leaking product, liquid leaking product onto the ground. So in this particular instance, there's valves on the hoses that are closed, and then the valve on the truck is what you call a pancake valve. So once it's disconnected, or once the valve is closed, it snaps closed and all that product is trapped. Either it's trapped in the hose or it's trapped behind that pancake valve, and there's no middle.
Would you like to continue with your presentation a little bit more or not? Or have you covered most of it?
I think I covered most of it, yeah. If you guys have questions, ask away.
All right.
Oh, actually, Mark, if you wanted to address how far we are along in the programs, I think Chet can speak to that.
Sorry, what was your other question?
Yeah, this would be with the Nevada Department of NDEP, with our local fire marshal,
Yeah.
state fire marshal, your emergency plan. How far along are we with those requirements?
We're just we got the plan itself, but we're gonna be starting after this. If we get approval here, we'll start that process with CAP and start moving that process forward.
Okay. Thank you.
I would also like to add that part of that process with the risk mitigation program and the process safety management, Energy Transfer also conducts, typically it's biannual, so every 2 years, if not every year. I'm sure the guy that does the training would love to do it every year. He comes out and does a pretty extensive training with the local fire department, any local emergency response that want to come, as well as surrounding counties. We had one in North Carolina where like 6 counties came, and it was 3 days. Not 3 days for everyone, but they split it up into 3 days. But he does a very extensive training on components of the transloader, components of the rail car, properties of the product, how you would typically respond. He's been at this like 60 years or something. He's very, very experienced, and he does a very, very good training. So we do also conduct that at every transload site that we have, at least every 2 years, if not every year.
All right. Is there any public comment? Come up, sir. Could you state your name and address for the record?
My name is Michael Jones. I live at 397 Mason Road, which is not far from this facility at all. I'm not opposed to it. I have some safety concerns. You addressed a lot of them. I guess the biggest one that I have is this facility already transloads propane on site, diesel fuel on site, and ammonium nitrate on site, right? So the concern is, just like with the Hazen disaster we had, what would be the long-term effects of a major disaster? Say 3 of these cars exploded, taking out the propane, If there's ammonia nitrate and diesel there too, what's the aftermath of that? What would be the impact to the surrounding community if that was to happen? We're not just talking about propane or butane or diesel or ammonia nitrate. We're talking about it all combined. EMS response times, the gates locked now, how would they get in? I know a lot of this would be addressed to the fire marshal. What can we do to educate the community as far as getting some of your permits, or not your permits, I'm sorry, your plans, I should say, your EMS plans, safety plans and that sort. You know, and again, like I said, I'm not opposed to it. I'm just trying to figure out how it's going to be contained and controlled. Because I don't live very far from there, and then I got a lot of concerned neighbors as well, you know, that have livestock and stuff like that. So I'm just trying to, I would like to know the knowledge of the extent of training, not only for the transloader themselves that are doing it with a portable transloader, the education that the drivers are doing it. There's no control room there, so there's no electronic devices hooked to anything. Like if you were to walk into a refinery, you have to go to a control room first. You don't go anywhere else on that plant until you check in with the control at the control room, right? So same thing in that scenario. Who's to say that any Joe Blow off the street can't just go in there with a truck and a trailer and attempt to transload? Where's the knowledge, you know? Is the transload facility, is that personnel trained to spot something that the transloading operator might be doing in error and stop it before it's, and prevent it before it actually happens? You see what I'm saying? Is the facility at the level of knowledge that the transloader is? You say you had two guys there. What are their jobs? What's to say that one's not on the phone and the other's on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
And not paying attention. Complacency causes most disasters. You get comfortable in what you're doing, walk away. Grounding. Everybody knows when you push volumes of, whether it be liquid or whether it be vapor, through anything, even grains, even rock, they create what? Static electricity, right? Potential explosion hazard right there, because you're dealing with vapors. So, again, like I said, I'm not opposed to it, but I'd like to see a report that says this is what we're taking into consideration as far as preventing these things from happening, and then a follow-up to at least the public of saying, hey, this is how many times they've been inspected, what was the procedure in the inspections of the rail cars, is the transloading facility that's accepting these cars, are they inspecting the rail cars, and do they even know how to inspect them?
Yeah.
What is that procedure?
And we're here with your concern, and I believe that some of the permitting and some of those inspections and some of their continued safety that they went through, is addressed. I just don't know if that would be something that is privy to the public, that they can disclose to the public or to the neighborhood. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah, so typically the parts of the plan are not for security reasons, like the site security plan is not, obviously, because if we gave it to the public and it was somebody that had not good intentions, we don't provide the site security plan. But you can go I think it is actually on the EPA website, and the RMP is filed with the EPA, showing that there is a transload site here and all of the risk mitigation that we've taken. So when we sit down to do a process safety management plan and a risk mitigation plan, we go through every single thing, just like you said. What happens if 3 cars blow up? What happens if static electricity? What happens if a guy comes in and he's not authorized to transload? What happens? It's like ranked 1 through 5 basically, or A through E or something like that. So like 1 is the least likely, 5 is the most likely, right? So every single thing and every single step in that process is ranked 1 through 5.
Sure.
And that's part of it that is available to the public on the EPA website. Everything is filed with the EPA. Our process is very controlled. So hang tight because you had a lot of questions. But the first one about the like 3 cars exploding. So you should understand that butane does not just spontaneously combust.
No.
But typically explosions happen on a main line at high speed. So the track that we will be transloading on is about 215 feet from a main line. So the main line comes in, drops off our cars, and then they're moved 1, 2, 3, 4 at a time, whatever it is, at a slow speed. Obviously, you're not going to move cars at a high rate of speed in a small facility like that. So
Right.
they typically happen in a derailment with a lot of cars at a very high speed. I hate to bring this up, but something like that happened in Ohio. High rate of speed, main line, people aren't paying attention, boom, it happened, right? Just like you said, complacency causes disasters. I totally
That's
agree. So second part, how do you know if somebody just Joe Schmo off the street comes in to transload? So Energy Transfer has a system, a computer system, where a driver cannot come into the facility to transload unless he has a load number. We call it a TD number, or it's a load number. If they don't give that operator a load number that's legitimate, that shows their carrier, it won't show the driver name because it's not assigned to a driver, but it'll show the carrier number. And he has to know that TD number. If he doesn't know it, he doesn't transload. And Chet can attest to that. He operates a transload site for us in Anderson, Indiana, which is close to Indianapolis. If they don't have that load number, they do not transload, and they're not allowed there. Additionally, I'm 100% positive there is site-specific training. And then also every single driver is hazmat trained. This is not just your regular like over-the-road LTL truck driver. They're hazmat trained. Additionally, our operators are hazmat trained, and there's a 14-point checklist. That's just the 14 main points, and inside there's like 20 smaller checkpoints that covers every aspect of their job.
That's a paper trail.
Yes.
Thank you, sir,
Correct.
for your public comment.
Yes.
Yeah.
We limit it to 3 minutes, so. Is there any other public comment? Could you please state your name and address for the record?
Nona McFarland, 6500 Workman Road. We have another facility that got approved in the county some years back, and we've had, I think, 2 major big explosions, and our fire department wasn't able to put that out. We had to get help from the Navy base and that, so I just asked Mitch, is this a different scenario here?
I'll address that.
Pardon me?
I'll address that when I come up.
Okay, thank you. So-
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, Mitch, would you like to come up?
For the record, Mitch Young, Fallon Churchill Fire Department Fire Marshal. I've looked over all the information that they provided. They provided emergency action plan, how the site's set up, everything that we've read. They're well within the established codes for the National Fire Protection Agency. I did talk to the State Fire Marshal's office. They are not interested is not the right word, but this doesn't fall under their purview. So, getting back to the 2 questions. The gentleman, yes, they do have multiple products on site out there. One of the things that we'll talk about, this will be more with the rail park owner themselves, is making sure that as we get these different hazardous materials or substances, whether it's hazardous or not, proper spacing, separation from, a diesel rig carrying diesel fuel from a, ammonium nitrate, type of those. You want to keep good separation. Those are things that we'll have to address as they come along. On her question, yes, we've had 2 issues out primarily at Bango. Both issues did come back to training, and both issues did come back to basic human failure. Okay, so there were mistakes that were made. Those things will be addressed. Their training, I looked at the training that they provided. Unfortunately, the public doesn't get to see as much information as we do initially, but it is quite extensive. We do have a few issues we will go through if this passes and we get this going. We will sit down, we will address some of those things in the emergency action plan that concerns us, especially as from Fallon. Some of their timelines in here are a little long for my taste, but they're used to theoretically dealing with the fire department who's 3 miles down the road. So we'll tighten up those numbers a little bit as far as that goes. There were some issues as far as the actual location of the spot, whether it could be moved a little bit. We'll have those discussions with them. But as far as the fire department goes, we don't have any real issues with the way it's set up. It's not that much different than what we already have out there with the propane. Transloading is not that uncommon. If you live in the county and they deliver propane, every time that truck comes to your house, that's transloading. It's the same thing. It happens all the time with very few accidents. So we don't have any concerns at this point. We'll deal with the other stuff just to make it more efficient, and the training, we'll deal with the training on the fire department side. So unless you guys have any questions for me, we don't, on the fire side, don't have any big issues with it.
All right, thank you, Mitch. Does anybody have any questions for Mitch up here on the board? Dean?
Yeah, it's actually a question for all 3 of you. Do any of you know what kind of security the site has now? It used to be pretty wide open and without even a gate, but I understand they're making changes. So I was kind of wondering what the current situation is.
Yeah, the site manager is actually here. She can speak to it, but they are currently putting a fence to fully surround the whole facility. It's in progress now.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Mitch. Do we have any more comment from any of the commissioners? Seeing none, can I get a motion for the decision?
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Goings for the record. Based on the information provided in the application and the staff report and heard tonight, I move the findings have been met for conformance with the criteria found in CC 1608-080H, and therefore approve the application for a special use permit for rail-based services transloading of butane for tactical cleaning acquisition on APNs 009-25177. This approval is subject to conditions as listed in the staff report.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously.
Who was the second on that?
Joe. So there is a 10-day appeal period on all the applications approved by the Planning Commission. After that time, the department will contact the application and complete the process with you guys. Thank you. Okay, item F, and please bear with me, there's a few parcel numbers on this one. So consideration of a possible action for a special use permit application for renewable energy geothermal drilling activities filed by 40 Mile Desert Resources LLC. The properties are located off of Nightingale Road, assessor parcel numbers 003-671-01, 003-671-02, 003-671-03, 003-671-11, 003-671-12, 003-671-13, 003-671-14, 003-671-14, 003-671-15, 003-671-22, 003-671-23, 003-671-24, 003-671-25, 003-671-26, 003-671-27, 003-671-28, 003-671-32, 003-671-33, 003-691-05, 003-691-06, 003-691-07, 003-691-18, 004-031-24, 004-051-29, 004-051-30, 004-051-31, 004-051-32, 004-051-33, 004-051-34, 009-251-15, 009-251-24, 009-251-25, 009-251-26, 009-251-88, 009-291-06, 009-291-07, 009-291-08, 009-291-09, 009-291-10, 009-291-28, 009-291-29, and 009-291-30 in the RR20 and industrial zoning districts. So, is there anybody on behalf to speak on this? Please come up.
Next agenda, I'm going to punk you.
So, thank you guys. State your name and address for the record.
Paul Conrad. I'm the site permitting manager for Fervo Energy. We filed this under our subsidiary, 40 Mile Desert Resources LLC. We're headquartered at 910 Louisiana Street, Suite 4400 in Houston, Texas.
Brandon Law, Director of Land, Environmental, and Permitting for Fervo, and same address.
All right, thank you guys. Dean, I'm going to let you take the round.
Thank you. Dean Patterson for the record. So the application is requesting a special use permit for major power generation to drill a large number of geothermal exploration wells. Major power generation is an allowed use in the use table for the RR20 zoning district needing an SUP. The exploration project will extend across many square miles, especially considering the access needs, and you can see a picture of the extent of it on the screen. If the exploration finds that there's power possibilities, future SUPs will be submitted for the power plants, and there could be quite a few power plants. Each parcel in the project area is 1 square mile of land. This is called a section in the context of the section township range format of land description. The applicant holds geothermal leases on over 40 sections of land that are under the ownership listed in the staff report. Excuse me. These lands lie in the checkerboarded area where every other section was given to the railroad company as an incentive to build the railroad. Those sections were thus made private, mostly in the 1895 time period for the south half of the project and 1922 for the north half of the project. The result is that the leased area includes extensive private lands intermixed with extensive federal lands. And just to point out, that long list that you read was probably half private and half federal or something along those lines. The project is largely focused on the private lands at this point to avoid delays of developing federal lands, which require time-consuming development permits and processes. There is limited development on the federal lands planned, mainly limited to corner crossings or across the checkerboarding, or short segments for roads. A successful outcome on the private lands would possibly encourage the commitment to develop on the federal lands as well. The location. The project area is in between Hazen on the south of that. Oh, can you go back one, or back to the map? Well, it's not working.
Back to the overall map. There you go.
One more. There. So Hazen is down on the south end of the red squares, and Desert Peak is toward the north end. So it's in between those areas, and so you can see Desert Peak is sort of up closer to I-80. The exploration will take place in 2 phases. Phase 1 will be small, and go to the other map, please. You can see the green squares, a couple in the north and some more in the south. Those will be phase 1. Phase 2 will be large, being the blue squares on the site map. There's road work associated with the phasing as well. While drilling wells may extend over 2 to 3 years, evaluation of the wells will begin shortly after their construction. Power plants may be started before all exploration is completed, and perhaps the applicant can describe that a little bit when they have a chance. Because of the remote lands and the checkerboard challenges, the primary issue of concern is road access through the expansive area in a remote location. This includes the fact that much of the area is planned for industrial development in the master plan. As far as the operations description, the application provides extensive details for the project. The general approach for exploration is summarized in the staff report. This project proposes a different method of geothermal power production than is historically seen in Churchill County. It's not dependent on finding shallow hot spots that also have hot geothermal well water to pump out for use in the power plant. Rather, this method drills paired wells a mile or so deep to hot rock formations, and then uses directional drilling to create horizontal well bores, perhaps another mile horizontally. It injects water into the hot rock in one well, the water passes through the hot rock, and the hot water is extracted from the other well to make power. Since the rock between the paired wells may not have pathways for water to travel from one well bore to the other, rock fracturing techniques are used, commonly called fracking, along the parallel horizontal sections, and the industry calls these techniques stimulation. So you'll see that description in the application materials. This also negates the need for a large water supply to be naturally in the rocks, so the company can bring an initial supply of water and then reuse it. While this is not a literal closed-loop system, it operates similarly. Note that fracking has been associated with increases in earthquake activity, but for different types of wells and different types of settings, and the matter is discussed in the staff report. The drilling activity on the well pad will be a 24-hour operation with staffing near 25 people. This does not include truck drivers. The geothermal exploration will generate temporary well drilling and construction jobs. No permanent employees will result from the exploration phase. That would come with the construction of power plants. The overall phasing layout is described in the staff report, which I just described and showed on the screen up there. Within each section, approximately 3 well pads will be drilled, with one being in a central location. Can you go to the, yeah, there. So within each section of land, you can see 3 squares normally. Again, one is centrally located, and the other 2 being along one side of the section. Each well pad can have multiple wells on it running in different directions. While there will be variability, the general idea is that the 2 well pads on the side of the section will have multiple sets of paired wells extending from the well pad and then across the section. The central well pad would have different directional configurations. Note that there is a reference in the submittal material that describes horizontal lengths of 10,000 feet, and this would allow well bores to cross property boundaries in one leased section of land after, for example, traveling a mile underground, and then onto an adjacent leased section of land, possibly another mile. And so mainly those other areas would be the federal land being in the checkerboarded area, and the federal land has leases on them. Note that this method does not require miles of piping that are common to surface piping that are common to the existing geothermal plants in our area. Each well pad, can you go to the picture? Yeah, thank you. So there's a picture of a well pad. This one's probably larger than what they're proposing here. But each well pad will be in the 5-acre size range with access roads connecting to the main roads. And the application and staff report describe the well pad activities. Regarding roads and access, facilities in remote locations usually have legal and physical access problems. This is one of the primary issues discussed in the staff report. In summary, the project will use historic RS 2477 and new roads. Permissions are obtained from the project properties, being private properties, for additional road improvements. And the applicant's working with federal agencies for corner crossings and segments that cross federal land. Additional permissions will be obtained before the exploration commences. There are 5 SUP criteria that are reviewed in the staff report. Part of the review is the discussion of compliance with renewable energy facilities codes, which there's quite a few of them. There are a few minor issues identified, such as worker housing, coordination with NAS Fallon, et cetera. Water is a potential concern. However, the well drilling comes with some water allowance, and the applicant has a large block of leased water available to provide any extra water needed for exploration. Other water may be needed for the actual power facilities. Road damage is likely during the project, and a road maintenance agreement will be established. As I mentioned, earthquakes are discussed in the staff report. Staff describes why this is not a setting that should generate earthquakes, but also describes some precautions. So you'll see those in the conditions of approval. And the other items are addressed in the conditions of approval as well. But the primary issue discussed is the legal and physical access, and this is discussed in detail in the staff report. And in summary, the project is able to use those RS 2477 roads that have existed for over 100 years, unlike smaller projects that the Planning Commission has seen that have difficulty resolving the access problems. This is a large project, and it's able to deal with almost all of those issues, and we'll be working out the remaining issues before operations. Even so, the access issue results in multiple recommended conditions of approval. We did get comments on the application. It was more of an inquiry from the Nevada Department of Wildlife. Had a few questions, but they didn't really provide any comments. We also had the application reviewed by the county's water consultant, Chris Mahana, and he took a look at the materials and didn't see anything major at the exploration phase. He may want to know some more during the power production phase. So with that, staff recommends approval and includes the list of conditions in the staff report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dean. Is there anything you guys would like to add?
We do have a PowerPoint presentation, a handful of slides.
That'd be excellent. You guys, do you have that, Diane?
Yes. Excellent. Just a quick refresh. So I'm Paul Conrad. I'm the site permitting manager.
Brandon Law, Senior Director.
And we work for Fervo Energy. Fervo Energy is the supersidiary over the entity under which we filed this permit. Really appreciate you reading off all of those parcel numbers and running through all the details of this. Obviously, there's going to be lots of questions, but we hope to address them here. I do want to emphasize, and it was shown there on that map, that the vast majority of those parcels are purely for potential access, not for actual drilling and development. As Dean mentioned, this will be in 2 phases. The first phase would cover 3 potential section squares, with that information that we glean from the first phase informing the second phase, which would be an additional, I believe it's 8 section squares. So that list of parcels goes down to a total of 11 in terms of where we would actually be drilling. If we could see the next slide, please. So just a quick overview of who Fervo Energy is. We were founded back in 2017. We're a fairly small company. I believe we just passed 110 employees. And the founding principle of Fervo has been to apply the drilling technology that has been innovated in the oil and gas industry, particularly around directional drilling, and apply that to geothermal energy. What we hope to do with this application of those innovations is to radically change the game in terms of how much geothermal power we can generate in this country. It's shown at a high level there in that second diagram, but currently conventional geothermal, which requires finding things like natural faults to run water through to harvest underground heat, is limited to around 9 gigawatts across the country. We think that our technique could increase that by more than an order of magnitude, up to 250 gigawatts or more, purely by applying our technology and removing the need to have natural underground ways for water to propagate through the rock. And we'll go into those details a bit later. We have about 500,000 acres leased across the western U.S., and we have close to 600 megawatts of contracts currently in place, and we're currently negotiating more. This isn't, we're not an R&D company, we're not a pie in the sky, we hope this technology will be here in 5 years company. We're a company that's doing it, and we're doing it right now. If we could have the next slide, please. So this is the project that we're currently operating, our first major project in southwest Utah. It's the second project that we got off the ground. Our first pilot project, called Project Red, is located near Winnemucca. It was a single pair of wells that was tied to Google, I believe, to prove out this technology of directional drilling applied to geothermal, and was successful. And we are now in the process of doing this at a much larger scale in southwest Utah. We have concrete plans to build sufficient wells to generate 477 megawatts in this southwest Utah project. And we think it has the capacity to take that all the way up to 2 gigawatts. And just as a quick refresh back to that previous slide, that was 9 gigawatts across the entire country of conventional geothermal. And we think this single project in southwest Utah has the potential for 2 gigawatts, a sizable fraction of everything that's currently produced under conventional geothermal. Over there on the left is a cross-sectional diagram of the types of directional wells that we intend to drill. Part of the innovation of using these directional drilling techniques in geothermal is that we can very much limit the amount of impact that we have on the surface. You can see there one of our well pads that we called the Frisco pad. We drilled 4 directional wells from that single pad, and that pad is highlighted there in that picture. From that pad, we drill these wells targeting rock with a specific temperature, currently around 400 degrees Fahrenheit. We're always pushing to try and improve that temperature, get it up to 450 or more. Hotter rock means more energy means more electricity. But this is our innovation as a company, is to directionally drill into very hot rock and harvest the heat from it to generate geothermal power. We've constructed 5 well pads out at this project. We've drilled or are currently drilling 15 wells. We've stimulated or fracked 3 of those wells and currently stimulating 8 more. And we will be bringing our first power online in June of 2026. And then bring it all the way up to 477 megawatts by June of 2028. So to talk a little bit about what we're proposing here, So this proposal is not for, as Dean mentioned, to build power plants. It's not to build pipelines. This is purely an exploration project. Our geologists have identified this area, traditionally called, I believe, the 40-mile desert area, the checkerboard, as having the potential to have the hot rock that we're looking for at the depths that we're looking for. We would proceed starting with the northern phase 1 exploration area, constructing 2 of these well pads and drilling a handful of wells. We would then move to the southern phase 1 exploration area, and based on the results, the temperatures, the tests that we run on those wells, we would use that information to inform which of the phase 2 exploration area we would want to go construct and drill, and what we think the ultimate scalability of power generation of this area might be. So the request today is to construct well pads and to drill wells, and then if our exploration is successful, we would come back and apply for a major SUP that would describe what power plants we would want to build and where and how they would operate. Next slide, please. This is a highlight of those first 2 exploration areas and the relative size of the pads and roads that we would want to construct. Each of these pads, there's a diagram a bit later, but these would be roughly 450 feet by 650 feet. They're largely built using the material in situ. We don't like to bring in tons and tons of aggregate just because it's expensive. So we would do a cut fill analysis of the material that's already on site, use as much of it as we can and compact it, and then bring in aggregate from off-site sources and create a level pad for our drill rig and support equipment to operate from. These drill rigs are very large. The one we're currently using in Cape, once the vertical boom is fully extended, is 175 feet tall. And once they are operating, they would operate 24 hours a day with a crew of 20 to 25. Historically speaking, one of the things that really drives value in our business is how quickly we can drill these wells. Drilling wells is expensive. When we first started drilling these wells in our pilot project, this took upwards of 40 to 60 days per well. We are now pushing the 20-day limit, drilling a well every 20 days out of our Cape project. And we would hope to take those learnings and apply them here as well. So it's not something that we're interested in allowing to go on for a very long period of time. We want to go in, build the pads, drill the wells, and quickly get to the testing phase to see if this area has the geothermal energy potential that we hope it has. Next slide, please. I know we'll get into access here in a moment. A lot of what you saw on that development map showing various ways of access, there are existing roads out here. The existing roads that you see are shown in blue. We call that the southern access coming off of California Road, which is a gravel road that runs parallel to a power line. We also have the northern access, which comes off of Old Highway 40, again, an existing gravel road. In addition, on the maps that we showed were a network of RS-2477 roads that could also be used for access. We would not plan to use all of these. We would plan to find the route that best works for our pads, and we would secure all private access legal requirements, legal contracts necessary to build or improve any of these access points before we go in and build the first pad. And I believe one of the conditions in front of you is that we will provide the county with legal proof that we have access via one of these routes before we get started. I would also like to point out that the northern phase 1 access area requires the least amount of new road and new contract in order to access. The main permit that we're seeking there is it's called an SF-299 with the Bureau of Land Management to construct a third of a mile of road across a corner of their property, which would allow us to access and begin drilling the northern phase 1 area. In terms of traffic that could be expected with this project, it is very hot and cold in terms of the period that's currently being operated in the drilling. The heaviest periods of traffic would be when the drill rig is actually being moved, and then when we do what's called well workover or completion operations. That heavy truck traffic would generally last on the order of days to 1 to 2 weeks, at which point things settle down during normal drilling operations. And those traffic densities are summarized in the table. And then a lot of this I believe we've already covered, but these pads we build with in-place material. They generally be between 450 and 650, depending on how many wells we intend to drill from each pad. And we would also be housing this crew that would be operating on the site itself. So we would be bringing in mobile living trailers for them to live in, and we would secure the required county permits, temporary use permits, placement permits, as the building personnel require for them to be placed. All of this would be temporary, and we wouldn't be building any permanent structures as part of the exploration project. Everything is modular, everything goes onto trailers, and once a well is complete and a pad, all the wells have been drilled from a particular pad, the whole operation packs up and moves to the next pad. And then this is an example of what the underground would look like, in particular these horizontal wells. So the process that we would follow is first the well pads would be constructed. The drilling would commence, where we drill a number of these horizontal wells from a particular pad. Once all of the wells have been drilled, we move into what's called our completion operations. This is the fracking that Dean alluded to. And this is where we stimulate the underground rock to create fractures through which our water would flow. Once those fractures have been created, we commence with well testing. And this is where we cycle water through those fractures underground for a period of about a month and evaluate the temperature of the water as it's extracted. This is ultimately the test that we're seeking with all of these activities, to tell us how much heat is in the rock and if our technique is going to work. The water that we would use to operate all of this would come from groundwater source wells that we would also drill from these pads. We would file for a temporary waiver with the Nevada State Engineer to allow water for drilling use without an associated water right. And if the engineer so requires it, we have leased sufficient private water rights to allow us to cover all of the proposed activities. And that's the high level of what we're hoping to accomplish. This is our core values as a company. In particular, I think the one I want to highlight is that we do what we say we're going to do. It's something that I myself in permitting and Brandon also take particularly seriously. And I would hope that, and I think Brandon would agree, that the folks over at Beaver County, Utah, who are currently governing that project, would say the same. And with that, I'll take questions.
All right, thank you, guys. So I did have personally one question. So is the one in Beaver, Utah up and running then? Or is it still in the process of getting there?
We are currently constructing power plants for that project. We intend to flip the switch and start generating electricity by June of 2026.
All right. And then one other question. I mean, just so everybody's aware that this is all just for exploration. This isn't to build a power plant.
Correct. If this proves out the resource, we'll be back in front of you, hopefully in a year or two, to propose a major SUP for power plant construction.
Yeah. So with that, I'll open it up to the board. Any questions?
I do have several questions. I know you hit some of this in one of the last couple slides there. So you're actually casing them, cementing them, and then it is for exploratory drilling. So how do you seal them in the end? Lack of knowledge, but I would like for everyone to know.
Sure. So our wells are permitted through the Nevada Division of Minerals. Each of these wells individually will receive one of those permits. Those permits are primarily geared around protecting local groundwater, and they specify the requirements for how they will be cased in steel and how they will be cemented. We are cementing all of our wells all the way to depth at our Cape project. Presumably we would do what is similar here as required by NDOM. And then in terms of how these wells would ultimately be abandoned, so these wells would operate most likely for a period of decades, depending on that flow test, to tell us how much energy is in the rock and how quickly we can extract it. Once a well is no longer used or necessary, or if that well encounters something unexpected and we don't want to use it, I understand that the abandonment process is to fill it entirely with concrete, but that process is also dictated by our NDOM permits.
So they will be sealed?
They would be filled with concrete from end to end.
Which would seal them? Correct. Perfect.
At the end of life, not at the
Correct.
end of
Exploration. Correct. Another question that I have was in regards to the sealing of the wells. Soda Lake, so there is a distinct difference between the existing power plant that's already there and then the exploration that you would be doing. Can you explain to us what's different, what is your procedure different versus the geothermal plant that already exists there?
Sure. So, are you familiar? Okay. Yeah. So that power plant uses conventional geothermal. Conventional geothermal generally does not employ this kind of directional drilling, but the real difference is in the well stimulation. So conventional geothermal, up until Fervo's business model, has generally required three things. It's required shallow rock, rocks that's close to the surface and can be accessed, rock that's hot, that has a lot of heat that can be extracted for electricity, and rock that's what's called permeable, rock that allows water to flow through it naturally. Usually this is in an underground fault of some kind that they find with the borehole and then cycle the water through it. Fervo's innovation is to remove that third requirement. So we don't need permeable rock. What we're looking for is shallow and hot rock. And we create our own permeability through this well stimulation technique.
Do you feel that yours stimulates the underground more so than what the standard or the existing geothermal plant is doing? So you would stimulate more? Is that what you...
We would be fracturing the underground rock, which is not something that is done in conventional geothermal. However, the way that we fracture the rock in these hard rock bodies like granite is very isolated to the particular area that we're trying to stimulate. So if you can imagine from this diagram, two wells going down in parallel to each other in an L shape, the intended stimulation is to create fractures between those two parallel wells. And the intention is not to create fractures at a great distance from those wells. And those are the techniques that Fervo has actually patented and is on file, is to create highly isolated fractures between two well bores. And that creates the zones by which we harvest the heat from underground.
Okay, and then I have one more question for you, and then I'll turn it to somebody else. And I know that you, in the reading of all the documentation, I know you refer to the increased earthquake activity. And in doing so, you guys have contacted USGS in regards to the risks, and they have deemed them to be significantly low risk. My only concern would be, and I know this is different from Winnemucca, but we do have Soda Lake, which is volcano. And that particular volcano has been listed in 2018 as moderate threat risk for the state of Nevada, and it's the only volcano in Nevada. Has that been assessed or looked into?
I don't know if I can say that that specific risk has been looked into, but maybe I can speak a little more about how we do manage induced seismicity ground vibrations, because I know it is a large concern with any sort of fracking activity. What we commit to in our application and what is currently being used in our CAPE project in Utah is, first, we would install a network of seismic monitors. There was actually a picture that went up briefly when Dean was presenting of what one of those monitors look like.
Okay.
They're very small housed plastic units. They have seismometers inside and they have transmitters.
Okay.
And these have currently been deployed, hundreds of them, across the CAPE site to monitor ground vibrations as we undergo well stimulation. So our commitment is that we would install a similar monitoring system here in Corsac before any well stimulation takes place. That all of these seismometers would feed remotely to our geology team, and they would establish before any well stimulation takes place something called a traffic light protocol. This is something you can actually read about on Fervo's website of what's currently in place at Cape, where we establish thresholds of if we see ground vibrations approaching a level that a human being can feel, then we are required under this internal standard to change, stop, and assess operations to prevent those vibrations approaching any level that would be of concern. And that traffic light system that we would put in place here and that is in place at Cape is very, very conservative. Generally speaking, the USGS has published that around 3.0 on the Richter scale is roughly about the human threshold for what you can feel in terms of ground vibrations.
Mm-hmm.
At Cape in particular, we have set our red light standard, essentially what would require a full shutdown of operations to assess at that threshold. And we have been operating there. Our first well stimulation took place in March of 2024, and we're currently undergoing well stimulation again. We have never experienced a red light event at Cape. And we would instigate something similar here.
So, and have you done any operations where you've been that close to a volcanic matter? Or, I know you're stimulating the ground, you're looking for that hot rock, it just is kind of a concern.
To my knowledge, no, but I'm also not the geologist. I'm not exactly
Either
sure.
am I, that's why I'm asking you.
We do have an entire team that's dedicated to this subject.
Okay.
And so it's something that we take very seriously. And because of the nature of our business, several of our areas of interest are close to inactive volcanoes.
Which is probably where you get the stimulation and the good rock.
The hot rock, that's where the hot rock is.
Yes, I understand, thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Anybody else have any?
Yeah, Jeff Goings for the record. Can you expound on the water? It was interesting to me that you can actually import water from different locations to use here. That water's coming from groundwater surrounding these sites, or is it, how far are you bringing water in? That's question one. Question two was,
Let's just start with question.
Yeah, let's start with question one, sorry.
So we wouldn't be trucking water in. We would be drilling groundwater wells from these well pads once they're constructed. We would file and have filed for exemptions with the state, which is a conventional practice to allow drilling geothermal exploration wells. The general thinking behind that exemption is that you're basically taking the water up and sending it right back down as you're drilling these wells. So it's non-consumptive and it's also temporary. Where our technique is rather innovative when it comes to those exemptions is in particular around the testing phase, when we are cycling water underground for a very long time to evaluate the temperature. And we will be working with the state engineer as to whether or not the exemption that we're filing for qualifies for that phase of exploration. And if the engineer determines that it does not, that it is truly consumptive and a water right is required to offset that use, we have those water rights leased and available to draw from the groundwater wells that we would drill as part of this project.
Okay, and then the second part of that question was, is the way I understand this works, I spoke to a geothermal guy, is that we're injecting high pressure water at an extremely high pressure compared to the normal geothermal reinjection, correct?
That's true.
And then, can you just to kind of explain, so that high pressure injection, what kind of PSI are we talking about there?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have the number off the top of my head for how high it is. It is very high.
Yeah, okay. And then the way I gather that, then that high pressure injected water, then along with your fracking is how you're moving that water from the injection well to the actual production well, correct?
That's right. So large pumps create high pressure flow from our injection wells down underground through the fractures and back out of the production well.
Okay. So there's a actual pump on both sides. One is pumping in and one's pulling out, or no?
Conventionally, it's only pumped in. However, they do evaluate and are considering return pumping as well from the production side. You can get more pressure down than you can up.
Mark?
Yeah, just for clarification, high pressure but lower volume, right?
The volumes that we currently run through, I believe, were included in our application. Generally speaking, for example, that 30-day test does require a large volume of water. It's primarily because it lasts so long that we have to cycle this water for a period of weeks in order to understand how quickly the heat is dissipating out of the rock.
So just for my edification, it seems like the system where the traditional type of system or method in fracking, which can increase the incidence of earthquake, is where there's high volumes of water. Isn't that true? And you're using, what I understood from your report is you're using high pressure but lower volume. And so it wouldn't trigger an earthquake as much as a traditional method.
I think the primary difference between traditional fracking and what we're doing, traditional fracking, as I understand it, again, I'm not a geologist and an expert, but as I understand it, is done over large areas with high volumes of water, as you mentioned, but also through softer bodies, things like shales, whereas those techniques applied to our technology is to do it in hard rock at depth and in a much smaller volume of area. We're not interested in creating large fractures going out into a large body like oil companies who are trying to extract as much oil as they can from those fractures. We're interested in creating a small volume of fractures between these two wells.
Yeah, that helps. What size is the casing?
We're interested in as big of a casing as we can afford because that allows us to move as much water as we can, more water, more heat, more power. Right now, we are currently using a production casing at the horizontal level there of about 8.5 inches. And we're looking at evaluating what it might look like at 9.25 inches.
Last question. I thought in your presentation you do have a well where you have proven that this direct drilling with geothermal is working. You've proved it out. You're not producing any energy presently in Beaver, Utah, for example, but you have another one, right, where you have proved that this works.
That's right. So our first pilot project was in Winnemucca, which was a pair of wells and is currently generating power. And then we have conducted a test on our Cape project, which also proved it out as capable. And that's why we're building the power plants.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, do we have any public comment on this? Please come up, sir. Please state your name and address for the record.
Barry Wood, address 5573 Trento Lane. Yeah, first question is, how would this affect the surrounding areas' wells, if at all, the home wells?
Okay.
Actually, can you go ahead and make all your comments and then he can address you after that?
All right, well, I'm concerned with the wells, for one, our home wells in the surrounding area, close areas. If you're going to be digging these other wells and drawing water and then the fracking, is that going to affect our strata? Then also, with the tower that you're setting up, what kind of lighting is going to be on that tower? As far as, will you have like red lights, white lights for aircraft or whatever, so that they can actually see that tower at night? And those are basically my questions.
Okay.
All right, thank you. And I think we'll probably take all public comment and then have you address that. Is there any other public comment?
Nona McFarland, 6500 Berkman Road. I have some concerns with the overall concept here. I'm a fish out of water when it comes to understanding what these people are trying to say. But I think what concerns me is I got a notice in the mail because my property is part of this that's affected. And when I tried to contact somebody on the board, nobody even knew what I was talking about. And then I was notified that they were having a meeting on the 30th. And so I guess my question is, how long have any and all of you been aware that this is going on, that those of us that are being affected by this were just notified recently before you made a decision? And the other concern I have is my parcel, if I'm not mistaken, because it's a little bit hard to read, and I talked to Mr. Pattison yesterday, there's a road that goes through just a small parcel of my property, and he informed me that that's been there 100 years. And I'd love to see a map that shows that road for 100 years, because as long as we've been out there, it's been a little trail, and then it got a bigger trail, and it was all done by four-wheel drive and four-wheelers. And I was also said that I can't deny access. So I have some trouble with that. And I was contacted by a John Belland from Fervo about leasing and purchasing my property, and he sent me a text, and unfortunately my computer got hacked and I had no way of accessing him back, and I didn't have that. But I would like to have somebody from the company sit down and explain things better to me so that I can understand how this is going to affect my property, because, and they're telling me I have 220 acres when my deed says I have 246. So, and are there any other minerals that are going to be extracted that they're going to take in this process, and what are they?
All right, thank you.
And how are you going to monitor that to know how much they're taking out of the ground and the soil?
Okay, and we'll address that, I think, after all the public comment here. Is there any other public comment?
Do I push right here?
Yeah. Your name and
My
address.
name is Joyce Week, and I live at 4050 Allen Road, but I have property out at Hazen. And my husband worked on geothermal projects for over 50 years all around Nevada. He's passed on now, so I'm just know some of it. But my question is, I'm all for geothermal. I just only know the traditional kind. I don't know your kind. And you're exploring, hoping to build power plants. So my business property is.
Ma'am,
kind
could you
of at
speak
the
more into
end.
the speaker, please?
Pardon?
We're not catching you on record. Could you speak into the
Oh,
mic, please?
okay.
Thank you.
All right, I guess I better look at you guys then. My business property is at Hazen, and I know that the leases can come not real close, but kind of close to the back. So my question is, if the leases come close to Hazen, and then they do get the results that they want, how close to Hazen could possibly a power plant be built? That's my question.
All right, thank you.
And I'm all for geothermal. I just don't understand this procedure.
Is there any other public comment? Nope.
You hear me? So, I'm Matt McFarland, 6500 Workman Road. So I run a duck hunting thing out there on the same property as Nona. So recently, Fernley had a canal that they concrete lined. That's where we used to get all our water that ran out through that whole thing. From my duck club all the way out to another duck club. I recently talked to the guy at the other duck club. He said, he talked to you guys. You guys are gonna pump water. They wanted you guys to pump the water when it goes in and comes back out to fill their ponds up. Well, I used to work on oil rigs. I know that's not how it works. Oil rigs, you pump it in, comes back out and you recirculate, correct? I'm assuming that's the same for geothermal. We have water that still comes to our property, then peters out way before. They haven't had water for 4 years or better. So I was just kind of concerned of how he's telling me you guys are gonna pump water and fill their ponds up so they have duck hunting. They have a lot of members and whatever. So I was seeing what was it gonna take. If you guys are pumping that water, is it gonna dry me up completely to where I have no water at all, or how that all works? That's my only concern.
Thank you.
Rhonda Wood, 5573 Trental Lane, Fallon. To tag along with Barry's question, just wondering if you had to use more water to do the exploration, more than you intended. It was mentioned that you could acquire more. Where would that come from? How would that affect farming, ranching, wells, in the area? And then are there any contaminants entering into the stratas from this type of drilling?
Thank you.
Kathleen Denson, 707 Hart Lane. New resident out here, love it very much. From Northern California, I appreciate cheaper electricity very much, if that could be possible. But there's some concerns. Water is definitely one. Our well on Hart Lane has some quality issues, and so if there was something added to that, that would concern me. Concerned about the area is pretty sparse, so concerned about the noise a little bit, what might be generated with your project. The traffic also. We're horse people. We bought the most lovely ranch in the whole entire world, we think. And so we've already been riding over on what we call our Hart Hill. It has an H on it for Hazen, but we really think it's for Hart Lane. So that area we've already covered it on horseback quite a bit. We came out here for wide open spaces and hope that that continues. Understanding this is way over my pay grade. Don't understand what your water pressure, your fracking, all of that sort of thing. But it does seem to be like it will be pretty invasive. And I'm kind of curious about where the power will go. So all of Hazen gets free power, right? My mother taught me it never hurts to ask. So, but those are just some of my concerns. We have open range out here. Left California because of the fences, and being controlled on public lands. Don't want that to happen out here. I don't understand part of the geothermal with all the solar panels. If geothermal works, why there's so many solar panels along the highway. Like I said, it's over my pay grade, so some of my questions might not make sense. But anyway, thank you for your time, and keep my horse area opened.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Can we go more than once?
No.
One time.
All right, so no more public comment. I noticed you did quite a bit of writing there, so if you wanted to address a few things, I think first we can address too, that everybody was notified last week, you know, as we talked about this. We were notified last week, so everybody, you know, that's how long the county is, or us commissioners have known what is going on here. So to address that, Nona. But I'll go ahead and, or Dean?
Yeah, Dean Patterson for the record. I was just wanting to orient folks to where some of the speakers' property is compared to the project. Diane or Lorelei, can you go to the first picture of the larger area? Actually, go to the, yeah, that one. Okay, I think Hazen is at the very bottom. I don't know if this is going to work, but there we go. Hazen is down here. Hart Lane is kind of where the word scale is approximately. The Hazen H Mountain is in the, you know, I don't know about where the 27 is. This project comes out here along the Power Line Road. Here's Mrs. McFarland's property, and the Duck Club is like here next to the property. You have to go another 2 miles or so to get to the first set of well pads, another mile for the next set, another 2 miles for the next set, you know, all the way up to Desert Peak area where, no, that's probably 10 miles away. So, and then go to the other picture, the other map, please. So this is the production well area. What is that, about 8 miles to Soda Lake, so, and Trento. So it's quite a distance as far as how far the property owner's property is compared to the project well pads. And so it's very difficult for there to be that, be a water connection that distance. It would have to like affect the entire valley of the water level in order to affect wells that distant. So, but I'll let the more knowledgeable well people talk more about it.
So, thanks, Dean. That is one of the, I think most of what we heard about, or maybe we can just start with the water concerns. It is a very isolated project. We're not planning to bring in water from elsewhere. We're planning to use the water right next to where we're drilling. And in addition to its remoteness being an inherent mitigation to people's concerns about their wells being impacted, we also have legal requirements from the state of Nevada that would not allow us to impact wells.
Yeah, I think everyone's, or most of us in the planning world are familiar with this, that we are forbidden from having impacts, and it's regulated, and we do have to monitor for any impacts and mitigate those impacts. So not something that we see happening. Also, we do get a lot of requests from a lot of people that, and sometimes those requests don't make sense. We will not be pulling water out of the ground and adding it to a surface water. That's not something that we can do. It is something that a landowner did ask us for.
Let's see here. It's also worth mentioning the volumes that we're talking about. So during the actual drilling of these wells, again, we're generally drilling a single geothermal well in the 20 to 30 day time frame. That requires on the whole something on the order of, I believe it's 5 to 6 acre feet, also summarized in here, spread out over that time frame. The largest water draw that we see is for conducting this month-long test. And in order to accommodate the water for that test, we will slowly pull the water out of the ground over time and place water in large storage, and then use that high volume over that 30-day period for the test. So ultimately, the volumes we're talking about will be largely seasonal, but we're not talking about oceans of water. We're talking about periods of draw and periods of no draw. In terms of, I heard a question about lighting. So this will be a 24-hour operation, and for safety reasons, it does need to be lit. Dean and the building department have shared with us the dark sky lighting requirements that the county has, that all light, I believe, has to be directed downward, and we will be adhering to those lighting standards. But it will be a 24-hour operation, and it will have some lighting. In terms of noise generation, we will have some noisy equipment. The noisiest, we've actually done a noise study on the operation at Cape. The noisiest piece of equipment that we generally use is large diesel generators. These are generators generally on the size of a Connex. We bring in usually multiple generators to operate this electric drill rig. That can peak somewhere around, I believe it's 95 decibels, which is very, very loud. Generally speaking, we don't anticipate any kind of impact because of how far away we are. The nearest residence we identified in the community of Hazen was 5.5 miles away from the closest well pad. And just doing back of the envelope, inverse square law of noise propagation, it probably won't be perceptible at all at that distance. We also have OSHA requirements for noise that specify that we can't make a piece of machinery noisier than when we receive it and operate it. We have to have mufflers in place if it's manufactured with a muffler, and we have to maintain those. One other question I heard about the water: are we going to add any contaminants to the water? Everything that we send down the hole for drilling operations is governed by our NDOM well permits, and that is well by well. We do use something called drilling mud, which is lubricants that are used on the cutter itself as it drills through this rock to get the rock bits off and back up out of the hole so that the well can be drilled. All of those additives are completely non-toxic and completely non-hazardous and are regulated by NDOM. We will not be using any sort of hazardous substance down the well. Let's see. In terms of the road access, so we do highlight on the map the various options for access. It will be done in phases, starting with that northern access, which is farthest from all of these concerns and will require the least amount of new road construction and new contracts. For southern access, we do have a variety of options, including RS 2477 roads, but we have every intention of securing full contractual right-of-ways and legal requirements to use any of these roads. We're not interested in being a bad neighbor. We really want to get legal access for everything, and one of our conditions is we will supply the county with that before we do any sort of operations out here.
Ms. McFarland, John Bellin works for me, and I can give you his phone number.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
The question was asked, will we be extracting any other minerals? The answer is no. This is an exploration project. We are drilling holes specifically to run water underground and extract heat. If there is any other mineral extraction proposed, it has been suggested, for example, could our process be married with, say, underground hydrologic lithium mining, where you are trying to extract small lithium particles out of the water after you recover it? That would be included in a major SUP. But under this exploration project, we will not be extracting any minerals.
Our leases do give us the right to extract minerals from the geothermal brine, not something that's in our immediate future.
How close could a power plant be built to Hazen was another question that was asked. One thing that we have a real advantage of in our system is how modular it is. We can take the drilling process from one section square and apply it to another. That's not something that can be done in conventional geothermal because you have to target specific zones that are permeable. That's not the case with us. What follows from that is we are interested in building our power plants as close to our wells as possible. Every mile of pipeline for cycling this geothermal brine carries millions of dollars in the price tag. So at our Cape project, for example, we are currently constructing 3 power plants that will be cycling fluid from 3 well pads. The longest pipeline, off the top of my head, going to one of those pads is something like 1,000 feet. We won't be building power plants miles away from our pads. We want to build them right next door. Talked about noise, talked about lighting. Where will the electricity be sent? So we do have a PPA agreement in place to potentially supply power from this location in 2030. Do you know what the end user of that is?
I don't know how confidential that information is.
Okay. Suffice to say that we, just like for any other sales transaction, we have a specific buyer for the electricity that we will be generating. You know, we hope that this project is another gigawatt project, and we have all kinds of scalability potential to put in tens or dozens of power plants. And if that's the case, we're going to be looking for more electrical buyers, and absolutely, I think that conversation could happen for the Churchill County community. I would also say that it is good through this process to be the second, third, or fourth buyer at the table, because the first buyer is the one who is paying for all the research and development to get the process right for the Corsac project. That means more expensive electricity now, cheaper electricity later.
Go ahead, Randy.
And lastly, I think there was a question about open range land. Would we be preserving the open range character of this area? You know, obviously, a well pad is a surface disruption, but it is not a very tall one. It's not something that's going to be horrendously visible. We're not talking about building large structures. Obviously, the drill rig will be very tall and will be visible. But the other beautiful thing about our process is that we can drill multiple wells from single pads. And so what would normally, under a conventional process, where these, I believe it's a total of 35 well pads between the two phases, would mean 35 wells. In our case, we could be looking at 2, 3, 4, or more wells drilled from each of these pads. So overall, our surface impact is relatively small compared to the total megawatts we want to generate. And it means that we will have less impact on the open range character of this area.
I guess we could also note that our current project that is being constructed, the Cape project, is being constructed in the middle of open range, solid federal land on the periphery of private land. And we're working very well with those cattle grazers, and we have very little impact on them.
I believe that covers the questions
I
asked.
believe so. Randy, did you have something to add?
I did, but go ahead. Someone was asking about lights on top of the drill rigs.
Yeah, I believe he addressed it, that there was going to be lights on.
Yeah, it will have 24-hour lighting, overnight lighting, and we will adhere to the dark sky standards required by the county.
I think they're referring to the blinking lights you find on the top of towers, yeah.
Sure. So the FAA generally requires those kinds of aircraft avoidance lighting for structures that are over 200 feet tall. We approach that at 175, but we don't exceed it, so it won't have those kind of blinking aircraft avoidance lights.
One final question for me is, or not question, or statement, maybe just to answer. One of the public did contact me. One of the concerns they had was in the normal geothermal that we're used to around here, in a location around here, when those geothermal wells went in, it shut the geothermal off for the community, right? Because the mass that was being used at the geothermal facility is way more than the water was available. This is more of a statement to put people at rest. From what I'm reading and seeing with you, what you guys have here, this will not impact that water that's there. This is a completely different system and would not affect the actual groundwater, the way I'm reading it, correct?
What you are describing of that kind of conventional geothermal impacting water Our system is fundamentally different,
Right.
where we are creating isolated systems in our horizontal wells to cycle water and extract heat. We are not targeting permeable zones of rock. We actually don't like permeable zones of rock. We want to create isolated and controlled permeable zones, and that inherently keeps it separate from those kinds of impacts.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, there was I was taking notes as they were asking questions. You addressed the traffic, and one of the questions was the traffic impact, I think more primarily in Hazen, right? And what that would be during this exploratory phase, if approved, and then if and when you are successful and you're gonna do something down the road.
We would have periods of high heavy truck traffic. They would be isolated in nature. It's not something that we're asking for years of heavy truck traffic. And generally speaking, those high traffic time periods are restricted to when we are moving the rig around. It takes a lot of equipment and support personnel to take the rig down, put it onto trucks, move it to a new pad, and re-erect it. And then also when we are doing well completion, well stimulation activities. That requires a lot of deliveries and is generally a 24-hour process. But both of those periods of high and heavy truck traffic are isolated to a period of days or weeks. Once those periods are done, then there would be month-long periods of much lighter traffic where you're dealing with trucks for deliveries and for conventional passenger vehicles from the people who are actually operating on the site.
All right, thank you, guys. Is there any more comment from the board? Can I have a motion for the decision?
Zach?
Yeah.
Dean Patterson for the record. One last question. So in a good outcome for the exploration project, would you normally expect a power plant at each well pad? Or, I guess that would imply, 10 or more power plants out there. So I'm just kind of getting a handle on what that might look like.
Sure. Generally speaking, obviously the exploration project will evaluate what the actual productivity of these wells could be, and that will ultimately dictate how many power plants it could be. As an example, though, at Cape for a similar setup, we're currently looking at installing one large power plant between two well pads. So you can imagine for a setup like this, if it proves to be a similar viability, then you would be looking at potentially a power plant between each of the two sets of pads located on the sides of the section squares. Roughly one per section. I think there's a couple that have, or one, I guess, that has two sets, so that would have two.
Lorelei?
Lorelei LeBaron, Churchill County Code Compliance Official for the record. I received a question in regarding to how this may affect NAS Fallon.
I believe one of our conditions is to consult with NAS Fallon to evaluate any, if there is any disruption. We have not had that consultation yet, but it will be a requirement before we begin operations.
And just to further clarify, I have reached out to NAS Fallon, but haven't had a response. They've also been very busy with other things, so it's up to them to kind of respond.
Thank you.
All right. Is everybody, can I get a motion for the decision?
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Goings for the record. So I wanted to kind of looking around here. I'm prepared to make a motion here. We're going to briefly state something about the conditions of the approval, if it is approved, of this application. There is an extensive list of conditions that we are seeing here that I'm not sure that you as public get to see. If that is the case, I know that somewhere over here with Randy and Dean and these guys, you will be able to access these conditions, okay? I'm not gonna read them in full because there's 2 pages of them, but there's an extensive list of conditions that have to be met. So with that, Mr. Chairman, based on the information provided in the application, the staff report, and heard tonight, I move that the findings have been met for conformance with the criteria found in CCC 160808H, and therefore approve the special use permit application for major power generation geothermal exploration project submitted by Fervo Energy on the many properties listed in the application. This approval is subject to the conditions as listed in the staff report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And this passes unanimously. So there is a 10-day appeal period on the application approved by the Planning Commission. After that time, the department will contact you in the application and complete the process. So happy exploring. Move on to item D, the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair, Vic Ansotigi for the record. I move to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Joe Frey.
Okay. Item 11, is there any future discussion items? Seeing none, we'll move on to number 12. Is there any more public comment? Seeing none, this meeting's adjourned.